How's everybody doing? Welcome back to another episode of The Banker Next Door. I am your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. Today, I wanted to talk to everybody about beneficial ownership information. This is a very big deal. This might be probably the most important episode I've done so far. This is a really big thing, and a lot of small business owners around the U.S. are not even aware of it. They don't even know what's going on with this thing, and I think that's why this is such an important topic, and it is so timely. So before I get into it, I just want to give everybody a little background, a little context on what's kind of transpired here over the last few years. So a couple years back, there's a regulatory agency called FinCen. That's the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. FinCen operates out of the Treasury Department for the U.S. government. Now, FinCen requires, banks have to do a lot of reporting to FinCen. You can go to FinCen to get what's called a UBIPR report, which is a bank performance, basically a bank performance review report, to look at the financials and things of what's going on with any bank in the country. So, FinCen does a whole bunch of other stuff too. But what I wanted to key in on, so what happened was FinCen basically passed this regulatory rule and went to banks and basically said, okay, we want you to start collecting what's called beneficial ownership information. Now, what this is the bank has to account for 100% ownership in any entity that they lend money to. Most companies, this is no big deal. It could be the company could be operated as a single member LLC, could be operated as an S corporation that just has one or two owners, maybe a husband and wife or two partners, something like that. So it's a lot of times it's not that big a deal, and this is not necessarily information that banks weren't already collecting. Like, so in other words, I'll give you a typical situation. So somebody owns ABC company. They come to the bank. They own 100% of the company. Maybe it's just a small business. It's a plumber. We'll say it's a plumber. Okay, it's a plumbing business. They come in. Their business operates as let's say a single member LLC. They've elected to tax like an S corp, but it's an LLC organization. So they come in and we basically tell the owner, like, hey, no problem. Give us the following. We need a copy of your certificate of organization. We need a copy of your operating agreement, and we need a copy of what's called the SS4 form, which is the form that you get from the IRS, which identifies your tax ID number for the business. So you get those corporate documents, and then you get all the standard documents for the individual, name, address, date of birth, copy of their driver's license, social security number, all this kind of stuff. And you do all that as part of your different due diligence that you have to do for any customer that comes in the door. So the beneficial ownership was not necessarily information that wasn't being already obtained, but where it got rather difficult was in real estate partnerships. So if you had like a limited partner and a general partner, so the general partner is now owned by this other entity, and then there's two individuals that own that entity, which owns the general partner. And then you've got all these limited partners over here. Maybe you've got 10, 11 limited partners that all own different ownership percentages in that company. So what would happen traditionally is that a lot of times you would focus on, well, who were the biggest partners? So in other words, if there were 11 partners, but 4 of the partners combined owned less than 10% of the entity, and then you had 6 partners that own 90% of the entity. A lot of times you would just focus on those main 6 and say, okay, well, we'll take the guarantee of these 6 partners because they own 90% of the entity, because maybe the other members are just friends or family member or something that have, again, they're limited partners. They have nothing to do with the operation of the business. They just own a little percent. Maybe they threw a few bucks in or whatever to try to buy a piece of ownership in this, real estate investment or whatever the case may be. So, a lot of times, again, banks, not that they wouldn't account for these people or not that they weren't important. It just, you kind of, you take into the scope of the circumstances and look at the complications of what's going on, and you figure out, okay, well, what's the most important thing here? So, but beneficial ownership basically said, no, you now have to account for every single one of those individuals. You have to account for 100%. They all have to basically sign off on some documents, basically, and you have to get all of their, get a copy of their driver's license, get their social security information, their date of birth, all that kind of stuff to verify. But what happened was banks basically had a big pushback on this. They basically said, well, wait a minute, like, why are we collecting all this information? If the government wants this information, if FinCen wants this information, why don't you go collect it then? If you want to get all this stuff, like, because basically we're already collecting a lot of this stuff. You guys are just making us, putting a more compliance and extra step in the process that is not really needed. Now, FinCen come out, their side of the story would be that they're trying to combat, they're trying to combat against money laundering, different financial crimes and things that are going on, and so this is all just a big crackdown of them trying to stop illicit activities. So what happened was Congress steps in, and Congress passes what's called the Corporate Transparency Act. So now FinCen is going to be responsible for collecting this information directly. However, at the moment, so FinCen is now starting collection as of January 1st, but banks are also still collecting this information. And FinCen hasn't necessarily told banks that the law that Congress passed basically says that banks no longer have to collect this information. And now the business owner is now responsible for reporting it to FinCen. But FinCen has basically not stopped that yet. FinCen's basically saying, like, yeah, we're going to start collection, but banks, you need to continue collecting this information. So that brings us in here today. So now I'm going to bring in the website here. So this is the FinCen website. This is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. This is where you would come. This is basically www.fincen.gov/BOI for beneficial ownership information. And here is basically what you would, start to click on this, subscribe to updates, beneficial ownership questions. And we're going to get into this. So, but I want to read just something here first. So small business owners have a new reporting requirement in 2024, although most have until the end of the year to get it done. The Corporate Transparency Act requires small businesses with fewer than 20 employees to report their ownership information to the Department of the Treasury's FinCen network as part of an effort to curb money laundering and illicit financial operations. The reporting requirements began on January 1st, but existing businesses have until January 1st, 2025 for compliance. So if you have an existing business, you have a whole year to basically register. So businesses that form this year in 2024, they will have 90 days to fulfill that requirement. The online beneficial ownership information reporting tool is now open, thus what I'm showing you right here. The launch of the United States Beneficial Ownership Registry marks a historic step toward the protection of our economic and national security, said Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen. Corporate and anonymity enables money laundering, drug trafficking, terrorism, and corruption. It harms American citizens and puts law-abiding small businesses at a disadvantage. Having a centralized database of beneficial ownership information will eliminate critical vulnerabilities in our financial system and allow us to tackle the scourge of illicit finance enabled by opaque corporate structures. The reporting requirement is not annual. Business owners need only to update their information if they have a change in ownership. The information required includes name, date of birth, and address of each beneficial owner, the identifying number and issuer from either a non-expiring U.S. driver's license, a non-expiring U.S. passport, or a non-expired identification document issued by a state, including U.S. territory or possession, local government, or Indian tribe. If none of those documents exist, a non-expired foreign passport can be used. An image of the document must also be submitted. The company must also submit certain information about itself, such as its name and address. Some companies are exempted to this rule. For example, larger operations, including 20 or more full-time employees and more than $5 million in revenue and a physical operating presence in the United States, along with companies that report to the SEC, in other words, publicly traded companies, banks registered, broker-dealers, insurance companies, and essentially any other business that already reports ownership information to the government. Now, it's important to note that there is opposition to this right now. There is opposition to this. So the new reporting requirement has drawn some opposition. The National Small Business Association has filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court of the Northern District of Alabama, claiming the act infringes on state powers over the information of entities and exceeds Congress's power to regulate commerce. The association said a violation by a small business owner, unintended or not, could result in up to $10,000 in fines and 2 years in prison. But those penalties are only for willful violations of the law, says Gary Kalman. I don't know what other violations there would be. I mean, I guess you could claim you forgot, but anyway. Common stress is that worries over the cost of compliance are overblown. I don't think so, as most small business owners will have the required information at hand. So let's go in. So now here's the website I showed everybody. So now I want to go to a couple things. So let's go to an article here. So this is called Corporate Transparency Act Reporting Rules Will Challenge Banks. This is written by, this is Bank Director magazine, so bankdirector.com. And this is an article written by Constantine P. Lizas. So on January 1st, 2024, the first of 3 final rules implementing the Corporate Transparency Act beneficial ownership information requirement will go into effect. The first rule will affect what the Act calls reporting companies. However, we know less about how the second final rule issued on December 21st, 2023, known as the Access Rule, will affect banks. Community banks can expect challenges and chaos as the CTA adds a layer of beneficial ownership information reporting requirements to the FinCen rather than eliminating the current requirement that legal entities report BOI to banks. Thus, most business customers will have to report this information to both their bank and to FinCen. So now there are 3 parts to this rule. The first part was, again, if I click back here, the first part was this, basically just creating the portal, creating the reporting requirements, creating the portal, basically and notifying companies and saying, okay, you have to report this information to us and when you have to report it. The second information is this right here. And I'm going to the beneficial ownership information reporting rule fact sheet. So this basically lays out that, basically who can gain access to this information after you have filed it with FinCen. I find this highly disturbing, and we're going to see here. So reporting companies, and it goes into beneficial owners, and then, company applicants, beneficial ownership reports, timings, next steps. Hang on a second. This is actually not... This is not what I was looking for here. I was actually looking for the access framework. All right. Well, anyway, let's go back here for a second. So, okay. So I have it written down here. So let's just go in here. So, because I want to talk the access rules. So, authorized recipients. So obviously the federal government has access to BOI. So that basically means anybody in the federal government can get access to this. So local, state, and tribal law enforcement agencies can get access to BOI. Foreign requesters. So FinCen may disclose BOI to foreign requesters provided the request meets certain criteria. Specifically, the foreign request for BOI must be on behalf of a law enforcement agency, prosecutor, or judge of another country, or on behalf of a foreign central authority or foreign competent authority. Then we go on to financial institutions subject to due diligence requirements, of course, the bank. So in other words, if the banks stop getting this information, the government is going to say, well, you still have to have it. So then therefore you have to register with FinCen and you'll just have to download from our database to get the information. Federal functional regulators and other appropriate regulatory agencies. FinCen may disclose BOI to federal functioning regulators and other appropriate regulatory agencies acting in a supervisory capacity, assessing financial institutions for compliance with customer due diligence requirements. Treasury personnel. The CTA provides Treasury with a unique degree of access to BOI, making the information available to any Treasury officer or employee whose official duties require BOI inspection or disclosure, or 2 for tax administration. Then it goes on to like safety and confidentiality requirements, implementation of BOI access. And then you've got the next step is going to be the third part of the rule. The access rule is the second of 3 rulemakings planned to implement. FinCen will next engage in a third rulemaking to revise FinCen's customer due diligence rule, consisting with the requirements of the CTA. The access rule does not make any changes to FinCen customer due diligence rule. So Um, yeah, I have a major problem with this just because for a couple reasons. Number one, you're already you're already you're already registering this information. You're already registering this information with the government. You know, if like in other words, I live in Pennsylvania. So if I'm going to operate a business in Pennsylvania, there's a process. I have to go to an attorney. I have to have the attorney craft these legal documents. I sign the legal documents, and then the attorney takes several steps, and they register it with the state. They register it with the IRS. Thus, you get the SS form with the tax ID number. So all of this is registered, you know, and then if I have to go open a bank account, I have to bring all these corporate documents with me to the bank. And this is stuff this existed for years and years and years. Um, I go to the bank, I provide them all this information, they open me an account. Um, and what gets at the heart of this, I think, is a couple big things. Like number one is privacy. You know, it's the Fourth Amendment. You know, contrary to popular belief by a lot of people, I would say in our government, our regulatory agencies, you know, the government doesn't really have a right to know what you're doing. I know a lot of people will be shocked by that statement, but they don't. That's not how our government is designed to work. The government is designed to help facilitate things, not to render things. And I think that there's a couple more deeper things going on here. I think number one is our government has an insatiable appetite for data on the citizens of this country. There is no information that's too much. It's just this constant dredge of, we need more information all the time. We got to know every little thing about you. We got to know when you go to the bathroom, how much you go to the bathroom. And this is something that this has got there. At some point, there has to be some pushback on this. There has to be like, wait a minute, like this is a little too much. I mean, this whole thing has always felt to me from the beginning as just a big kind of big brother overreach. In a way, I think you could call it a cash grab, because you got to go in and sign in. You're going to have to pay. Now they say that like, oh, you only have to register once. Unless you make a change. Now, well, obviously, if you got a company that, you've got partners and other things, and you're making changes every couple of years, people buy out, buy in. Obviously, you're going to have to go in and remember to go in and update that information. And the penalties seem way over the top. Like I said, $10,000, 2 years in prison if you willfully don't comply with this. That seems incredibly egregious for basically documentation that's already registered with the state that you operate your business in. So again, I just, there, and the fact that, in other words, our system is supposed to operate like this. If the law enforcement or the IRS or somebody thinks that you're doing something illicit, okay, they then open up an investigation, and they come in and they basically, start finding preliminary facts about what's going on. Then if they suspect that they have probable cause and there's something there, then they go and they get a warrant, and they come in, they bring the warrant to the bank, and they say, hey, Mr. Bank, we want you to turn over all the records on such and such business. They can then contact the individual and say, hey, you have to comply with us. You got to come down here and talk to us. We want to interview you. We want you to turn over all this necessary information. If at that point they find a ton of information they take it to a grand jury, they get an indictment, and then they come down and then they arrest you. This, in a very real way, seems to me like this is just part of like the government wanting to just sidestep all that. They want to just be able to go around that. They want to be able to just have you report all this information. They want to be able to go in there, get as much information on you as possible without having to have any kind of a warrant, without having to request anything of any kind. I don't know. Maybe some people will disagree with me. Maybe they think this is an overreaction on my part. But the bottom line is that the fact that so many different people can get access to this, the fact that you have to provide all this information, the fact that you have to pay for it, the fact that you can get severely penalized for not providing it, and the fact that there are all these other people, financial requesters, local, state, and law enforcement, like all these different actors can just go in and boom, just get all this information on you in 5 seconds. And that I just don't think it's right. I don't think it's right. I have a major problem with it. And I would encourage people, if you're a small business owner, I would encourage you to call your local congressman and basically say, hey, what is this? Why do I have to comply with this? And what is going on? Just to, talk to me about this. Tell me a little bit more about this and explain this to me. Like, why do I need to register with FinCen, a company that you've probably never heard of, or a government regulator rather, that you've never heard of? Why do I have to register with them? Why do I have to start paying them money now for this? Why am I subject to these ridiculous fines if I don't comply with this? And who is going to get access to all of this information, and why do they need access to this information? So again, I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. I hope my point in putting this out there is that I want to raise awareness of this. I do think this is a very serious thing and something that people need to start looking at and talking about. I truly believe there's a lot of people out there that just don't even realize that this is a thing right now. And so like I said, I just encourage people to check it out, look into it. If you got comments, I'd love to hear your comments on this. So make sure to please leave them below. But please go. And with that, I'll wrap it up. Basically just say, hey, please go and check out some of the other episodes that I've got out there right now. If you like this, please give a thumbs up. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel. We are on YouTube, Rumble, all the major podcast platforms. And I hope you'll check us out and come back soon. So thanks a lot.